Let me ask you a question. You get to the lake at dawn, you find that perfect spot, and for an hour it's lights out. You're catching fish. Then, like someone flipped a switch, it goes dead. What do you do? If you're like 99% of the anglers out there, you just sit there. You wait. You change your lure for the 10th time. You tell yourself the fish just got lockjaw. But what if I told you the fish are still feeding like crazy, just 50 feet away and 10 feet deeper? In this video, I'm going to reveal the 3 predictable moves that fish make every single day. Understanding this is the single biggest difference between a brag-worthy day and going home completely skunked. It's not about a magic lure or some secret GPS coordinate. It's about finally understanding the daily commute of the fish you're trying to catch. So be honest with yourself, how many hours have you wasted casting at empty water? Let me know in the comments. For generations, we've been told that patience is the ultimate virtue in fishing. Grandpa taught us to find a good spot, anchor up, and wait them out. And there's some truth to that, but it's an incomplete picture. That old-school mentality was formed before we had the incredible technology we have today. It was based on feel, experience, and a whole lot of guesswork. The problem is, blind patience isn't a strategy, it's stubbornness. We get comfortable, we've got the cooler right there, the chair is perfectly angled. Moving the boat is a hassle, so we stay put, fishing a memory of that morning bite, hoping it magically reappears. We have fish finders that literally paint us a picture of the underwater world, showing us depth changes, structure, and even the fish themselves. Yet we often ignore the evidence and stick to the plan that stopped working hours ago. It's time to break that habit. First, let's talk about that morning feed. We all know the early bird gets the worm, but let's dig into the why. At sunrise, the water is at its coolest point in a 24-hour cycle. This cooler water holds more dissolved oxygen, which is like a shot of espresso for the fish. Their metabolism kicks into high gear. The low-angle light gives them a massive predatory advantage. They can see bait fish silhouetted against the bright surface, but the bait fish can't see them as well in the shadows below. This is the perfect storm for an ambush, so they push up into extremely shallow water, sometimes just a couple of feet deep, to pin schools of minnows or bluegill against the shoreline or a weed edge. This is not a casual breakfast, it's an all-out assault. They are aggressive, competitive, and relatively easy to catch. If you're not starting your day by casting right up against the bank or over the top of the shallowest cover, you are missing the easiest bite of the day. This is their first and most predictable location. Now we get to the first big mistake that countless anglers make every single day. The sun starts to get higher in the sky. The bite that was on fire for the first 2 hours suddenly slows down and then stops. The fatal assumption here is that the fish are done feeding. You might think, well, that was fun while it lasted. Guess I'll just wait here. This is where your day can go completely off the rails. You keep throwing that same topwater lure or shallow-running crankbait to the same bank you were just catching them on. You're fishing the ghost of a pattern. The fish haven't disappeared, and they haven't developed lockjaw. They have simply packed their bags and moved. Sticking to that shallow spot after the sun is high is like standing in a restaurant after everyone has left for the day, wondering where all the people went. You're in the right church, but the wrong pew. The party has moved and you weren't invited because you didn't know where it was going. So where did they go? This brings us to the first major move of the day. As that sun climbs higher, 2 things happen. First, the water temperature in the shallows begins to rise uncomfortably fast. Second, and more importantly, the direct overhead sunlight eliminates the shadows they were using for ambush. They feel exposed, vulnerable, and uncomfortable. A bass or a walleye out in the bright, open shallows at 10, AM is like a person standing in the middle of a parking lot on a hot day with no sunglasses. They want relief, they want shade, they want security. So they make a very logical and predictable retreat. They will pull back from the bank and look for the first significant change in depth or the first piece of heavy cover they can find. They are leaving the open-air cafe of the shallows and heading for the safety of an indoor booth. Understanding this transition is absolutely critical. Let's get specific about where they go. Their new home is all about shade and security. This could be the edge of a deep weed line, the shady side of a large boulder, or underneath a floating dock or a laydown tree. One of the most common places you'll find them is on the first major drop-off or break line leading from their shallow feeding flat into deeper water. Think of it as a highway exit. They fed up on the flat, and now they are pulling off onto this underwater ledge to rest and digest. They aren't necessarily going to the deepest part of the lake, they're just getting to a comfortable depth where the light isn't so intense. Your job as an angler is to stop casting at the bank and start focusing your electronics and your casts on these transition areas. You need to mentally draw a line from where they were to the nearest logical piece of safe cover or depth change. They are almost certainly sitting right there. Here's a simple way to visualize it. Imagine you are at a backyard barbecue. Early in the evening, when it's cool and pleasant, everyone is spread out across the lawn, mingling, playing games. But as the sun gets brutally hot in the afternoon, where does everyone go? They huddle together under the one big shade tree or cram onto the covered patio. Nobody is standing out in the middle of the lawn anymore. Fish do the exact same thing. The shallow flat is the big open lawn. The first drop-off, the deep weed edge or the shade from a dock, is their covered patio. They aren't gone. They've just consolidated into smaller, more predictable and more comfortable areas. If you keep casting out into the sunny lawn, you're going to come up empty. You have to be smart and cast where everyone has moved to escape the heat and the bright light. It's a simple analogy, but it's 100% accurate for fish behavior. This leads us to the second big mistake anglers make. Okay, so you're smart. You've figured out that the fish moved off the bank, so you back your boat out and start fishing deeper. That's a good start, but it's not enough. The mistake is assuming the fish are still relating to the bottom. Many fishermen will back off the drop-off and start slowly dragging a Texas-rigged worm or a football jig on the bottom in 15 to 20 feet of water. They'll do this for hours, getting very few bites, and get frustrated. They assume the fish just aren't in a chasing mood. But here's the kicker. The fish may not be on the bottom at all. The direct overhead sun of midday often pushes bait fish to suspend in the middle of the water column. And guess who follows them? That's right, the predators. This is where the entire game changes and where most people completely lose track of the fish for the next several hours. Welcome to the midday lull, or as I like to call it, the midday suspension. This is the period from late morning to mid-afternoon that crushes the confidence of so many fishermen. The bite just seems to vanish from the face of the earth, but it hasn't. It has just moved into the third dimension. The fish have entered their second major location of the day. They've often pushed out even further off the structure and are now just hanging out. They might be 5 feet under the surface over 30 feet of water, or 15 feet down over 50 feet of water. They are relating to nothing but the schools of bait they are following. They are in open water. This is, without a doubt, the most challenging period for the average angler to adapt to because it goes against our deep-seated instinct to always cast towards a visible target like a log or a weed bed. So why on earth do fish suspend in the middle of nowhere? There are a couple of key reasons. First, they are following their food. Pelagic bait fish like shad or shiners will often roam in open water during the day, and the bass or walleye are right there with them, like a wolf pack shadowing a herd of caribou. They aren't always actively feeding, but they are staying close to their next meal. Second, it can be a matter of comfort. Sometimes there is a distinct thermocline, a layer of cooler, more oxygenated water that forms in the middle of the water column, and the fish will sit right in that comfort zone. They are simply loafing, digesting their morning meal, and waiting for the next opportunity. For the fishermen stuck on the bottom, these fish are completely invisible and untouchable. You could have a school of giants sitting 10 feet right under your boat, and you'd never know it if your lure is digging in the mud 20 feet below them. Think about a time you've been out on the water staring at your fish finder. You see those classic, beautiful arches showing up on the screen, but they're not on the bottom. They are halfway between the bottom and the surface, just hanging there. What's your first instinct? For most, it's to ignore them. We call them non-catchable fish. We keep casting to the bank or dragging our jig on the bottom because that's what we know. We are literally watching evidence of the second fish move on a screen in front of us, and we refuse to believe it. This is a massive mental hurdle to overcome. You have to trust your electronics and have the courage to fish for those suspended marks. You have to stop fishing where you think they should be and start fishing where your electronics are telling you they are. This moment of trust is a huge step up in any angler's game. So how do you catch these suspended, uncatchable fish? You have to meet them where they live, in the middle of the water column. This means putting away the bottom-bouncing baits. It's time for lures that you can control the depth of, things like deep-diving crankbaits that you can get down to their level. It's time for jerk baits that you can twitch and pause right in their face. A swim bait on a jig head is another killer technique. You can literally count it down to the exact depth you're seeing the fish on your graph and swim it right through the school. Even a drop shot rig can be modified to have a long leader, suspending the bait well off the bottom. The key is to shift your mindset from bottom contact to depth control. You are no longer fishing the lake bed, you're fishing a specific number. You're fishing at 15 feet deep, period. That's your new target. Let's create a clear mental image of this midday scenario. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun is beating down and there's not a cloud in the sky. The water looks like glass. You've tried the banks, you've tried the first drop-off, and nothing. You're about to call it a day, but then you motor over a deep point and your sonar lights up with bait fish and big arches underneath them, suspended 20 feet down in 50 feet of water. The old you would have driven right over them. The new you stops the boat. You grab a rod with a heavy swim bait. You cast out. You count it down. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and you start your retrieve. Suddenly, your rod loads up with a weight you haven't felt all day. That's not luck. That is adapting to the second move. That is intercepting the fish on their midday route. It's a game changer. This midday pattern can last for several hours, but it won't last forever. As the afternoon wears on, the sun begins to get lower in the sky again. The light penetration lessens, the shadows start to get longer, and the water temperatures in the shallows begin to cool off a bit. The same environmental cues that drove the fish out of the shallows in the morning are now reversing. This signals to the fish that it's time for the third and final major move of the day. It's time to go back to work. Their midday siesta is over and their stomachs are starting to rumble again. They know that the bait fish are about to make the exact same move they did in reverse. They are about to head back to the shallows for the evening feeding window. The fish are getting ready to commute back to the office for the late shift. This leads us to the third big mistake, packing it in too early. So many fishing trips end in the mid-afternoon. People get beaten down by the sun and the slow midday bite. They figure the day is a bust and they head for the boat ramp. They completely miss out on what is often the second best feeding window of the entire day. The magic hour before sunset is famous for a reason. By leaving at 3 or 4 o'clock, you are essentially walking out of the theatre right before the climactic final scene. The entire ecosystem of the lake is about to wake up and do everything it did this morning, but in reverse. If you have the discipline to wait out the midday lull and stay for the evening session, you can often salvage a tough day and turn it into a fantastic one. Patience is a virtue, but it's about being patient for the right window, not just blindly waiting. The third move is, in many ways, a beautiful mirror image of the first one. As that sun angle drops, fish that were suspended in open water or holding tight to deep structure will begin to migrate back towards the shallows. They will use the same travel routes they used to leave in the morning. Those break lines, points, and weed edges, but now they're using them as on-ramps instead of off-ramps. They are moving back up to the shallow feeding flats. Their confidence grows as the light fades. They become more aggressive, more willing to chase a lure, and they are focused on one thing, stocking up on food before nightfall. The entire mood of the lake changes. You can feel it. The surface starts to come alive with the nervous flicker of baitfish, and you know the predators are not far behind. This is your cue to change your location and your tactics once again. Your fishing strategy needs to mirror this third move perfectly. You should stop fishing the deep, open water and start positioning your boat to intercept fish as they move shallow. A fantastic place to set up is on the outside edge of that same weed line or on top of the first drop-off, and cast into the shallow flat. You are essentially ambushing the ambushers. You're presenting your lure to fish that are actively moving towards you with the intention to feed. As the sun gets even lower, right down to the horizon, you should move even shallower, right back to the same banks and cover you started on at sunrise. The whole process has come full circle. It's time to pick up those topwater baits, those spinnerbaits, and those shallow crankbaits once again. You are closing the loop on their daily migration pattern. Let's put it all together into a single, cohesive plan for a day on the water. Your day should not have one fishing plan, it should have 3. Plan A is for the morning, from sunrise until the sun is high. This is your shallow assault plan. You'll use fast-moving, aggressive baits and target the shallowest water you can find. Then, as the bite dies, you switch to Plan B, the midday search. This is your deep water or suspension plan. You'll rely on your electronics, slow down your presentation, and focus on specific depth zones rather than visible cover. You're hunting, not just casting. Finally, as the afternoon progresses, you switch to Plan C, the evening ambush. You'll work your way from deep to shallow, mirroring the fish's movement, and end the day right back where you started, ready for that explosive evening bite. 3 distinct plans for 3 distinct fish movements. The underlying principle here is a crucial shift in mindset. You must stop thinking of a fishing spot as a single, static location. It's not just the old stump or that rocky point. You need to see it as a complete system with multiple parts. There's the shallow top of the point where they feed in the morning, the deep sides of the point where they rest midday, and the travel routes in between. A good spot is not just one spot, it's a whole neighborhood. Your job is to figure out which house they are in based on the time of day. When you start seeing your fishing spots this way, as dynamic environments rather than just pins on a map, you will unlock a level of consistency you never thought possible. You're no longer just getting lucky when you stumble upon them. You are predicting their location with educated accuracy. This concept applies to virtually every species of fish you can think of. Bass are famous for this daily migration. Walleye will do the exact same thing, moving from deep structure to shallow reefs or shorelines to feed at dawn and dusk. Even crappie will move up and down in the water column and in and out of cover throughout the day. It's a universal behavior driven by the fundamental forces of nature, light, temperature, and the location of their food. It's not some mystical secret, it's basic biology. Once you accept this as the fundamental truth of the lake, you stop blaming the weather, the barometric pressure, or your unlucky lure. You start looking at the clock, looking at the sun, and asking yourself the most important question in fishing: if I were a fish right now, where would I be? Let's be clear, this doesn't mean you have to be constantly running and gunning all over the lake. Sometimes these three moves happen within a very small area. The morning spot might be the top of a 5-foot hump. The midday spot might be the side of that same hump in 15 feet of water. And the evening spot is right back on top again. The move could be as little as 50 yards, but it is a move. The difference between being on the top of that hump and on the side of it is the difference between catching fish and catching nothing. It's about precision. It's about making small, smart adjustments throughout the day instead of just stubbornly pounding the same piece of water for 8 hours straight. The best anglers are the ones who are constantly adjusting, constantly tweaking their location and depth. They are always dancing with the fish. So, the final and most important lesson is this: the fish are almost always biting somewhere. The phrase, "the bite is off," is one of the biggest lies in fishing. In reality, it just means the bite is off, right here. The fish didn't stop feeding. You simply stopped being in the right place at the right time. Your strategy became outdated as the day went on. By understanding this 3-act play, the morning shallow feed, the midday deep retreat, and the evening return, you are no longer a passive observer hoping the fish swim by. You become an active hunter who follows the herd. You adapt, you move, and you intercept. This is the mental shift that separates the 10% of anglers who catch 90% of the fish from everyone else. You're not just fishing, you're problem solving. And the problem is always, where did they go next? So let's bring it all home. The fish have a daily commute, a predictable routine. They start shallow and aggressive in the morning. They retreat to deeper water or cover for security during the high sun of midday. And then they push right back into the shallows to feed again in the evening. 3 distinct moves requiring 3 distinct fishing plans. The most crucial realization, the real aha moment in all of this, is that the fish didn't stop biting. You stopped being where the fish were. You were fishing a memory of where they were an hour ago, and that's a recipe for failure. Once you truly grasp this and start moving with the fish instead of waiting for them, your entire approach to the sport will change. Your catch rate will skyrocket and your frustration will plummet. You'll feel like you've unlocked a cheat code for the lake. Thank you so much for watching. If this video opened your eyes, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges the old, outdated ways of thinking. Now, I have a question for you, and I want you to be honest. What is the single biggest aha moment you have ever had on the water that completely changed the way you fish? Drop that story in the comments below. I can't wait to read them.